always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, October 31st. Happy Halloween 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Aaron Kleinman of the States Project will be back with us to talk about important races to watch on Tuesday. And later in the show, Representative Ruwa Romman, the Georgia state rep who was blocked from speaking for uncommitted at the DNC, will be with us to talk about her plan after voting for Harris. Also on the program today, early good signs for the Dems. Women's make up 55% of the early vote, a 10-point advantage in swing states. And Gallup finds Democratic voter enthusiasm is at its highest since Obama in 2008. CNN poll finds Harris up in Wisconsin and Michigan, but in a dead heat in Pennsylvania, where the election could be determined. Trump played dress-up yesterday, posing in an orange vest, somehow more orange than his skin, with a garbage truck to play up Biden's garbage comments, which someone said first at your event, dude. And you're running against Kamala Harris. His campaign won a lawsuit in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, suing over long lines in early voting, which is rich coming from Republicans. They've extended that early voting deadline through Friday. Also in Pennsylvania, an appellate judge rules that undated or incorrectly dated ballots should be counted. This was from a past special election, and this will almost certainly be appealed. Workers for Elon Musk's super PAC allege poor working conditions and threats during their door-knocking efforts for Trump. And a judge orders Musk to appear in an emergency hearing today in a lawsuit against his $1 million campaign bribe giveaway. Trump tries to distance himself from Mike Johnson's plans to repeal Obamacare if Trump wins. The Wall Street Journal reports that Trump's team is drawing up plans to clamp down on legal immigration. A Channel 12 TV poll in Israel finds that 66% of Israelis want Trump to win, versus 17% who want Harris. And it's revealed that Biden's State Department has received over 500 reports that U.S. weapons have killed civilians in Gaza, and he acted on a total of 0 of them. New video and satellite imagery shows Israel has demolished hundreds, if not over 1,000 buildings in southern Lebanon. And lastly, at least 95 people have been killed by devastating flash floods in Spain. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. Happy Halloween. People say they're disappointed in my lack of costume. I'm not a Halloween girl. I've never been a Halloween girl. There was a whole period of my life where the stress of Halloween and having to both be creative and funny, but also look hot would weigh upon me, because it's really hard to do both. It's hard to not just be okay, I'm going to put on bunny ears and go to this high school party so boys will like me. But then also have to be I conceived of myself as smarter or funnier or whatever, and not be able to meld those two things. I'm just glad to have to give that
thinking person's hot
up.
Halloween costume.
Right. Now I'm 30 and I'm engaged. I'm not trying that much anymore. I'm yeah, I'll wear this big ass fat suit or whatever. Not fat suit. That's not the right word, but one of those big ones that are bulky and, I shouldn't use the term fat suit. What's going on, everybody? It's happy Thursday.
Happy Halloween.
Yes. It's, spooky times ahead of this election, although
80-degree Halloween in New York City.
it's ridiculous. That is spooky. We will be getting a little bit more into some of those topics in just a bit, but wanted to start here. I mentioned this headlining it, that across the battleground states that they were able to get data from, women are now accounting for around 55% of the early vote, and men are at 45%, which are signs that the Democrats are very happy about. I mean, women tend to vote more than men, but the fact that in Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, they were unable to look at that data in the 3 other swing states, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. But in Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, there's at least a 10-point gender gap in early voting so far. And this is why I am interested in how Fox News is covering this race in the final week. Here is the 5 reacting to... Well, let's play this ad first. They're reacting to this ad. And this is an ad by Vote Common Good, narrated by Julia Roberts. Apparently, this is like a religious Christian organization, liberal evangelicals, which you don't hear from too much. But it was founded in 2018, like a liberal Christian PAC that's anti-Trump. So they're putting out this ad here. And keep in mind what I just said about some of those numbers with women and early voting.
Your turn, honey.
In the one place in America where women still have a right to choose, you can vote any way you want. And no one will ever know.
Did you make the right choice?
Sure did, honey.
Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth. Vote Harris Walls. Vote Common Good is responsible for the contents of this ad.
So I liked that. I thought it was a funny touch to have her have the bedazzled American flag hat.
Well cast for the husband as well too.
Right. I like the contempt there too. Like, did you do the right thing? Did you do what your husband told you? Did you fulfill your wifely duties in that polling location? Thank you.
People are mad about this commercial.
I saw that there was somebody who's been doing calls for the Harris Walls team say that they've encountered this over the phone a few times. And by a few, I mean many times, they said. But it's hard to verify that kind of thing.
I feel like there was some of that talk about that in 2016, but this time you have your post row, your post January 6th.
Yep.
It's not Hillary. And I mean, I think people are so concerned about it because it kind of tracks. It
tracks with 2022 and those post-row numbers, as you say, where there's high enthusiasm among women, and because Donald Trump, the only election he ever won, was on the backs of suburban women, who he's also polling in so poorly with at this point. Harris has a double-digit lead with suburban women, which includes a lot of white women. This is maybe why Jesse Waters' panties are in a bunch here. Here is the crew with the 5 reacting to that particular ad.
First of all, Harold, I don't believe you know any white dudes for Harris.
I know a lot of white.
I don't believe that.
I know you.
Oh,
I'm kidding.
How dare you?
I know a lot of people for
Harris.
I
don't believe these fake stories that you're saying on television about these guys that they say that they voted for Trump and now they're voting for Harris because of their daughters.
When have I ever lied to you about that?
That is such a lie, Harold.
When have I ever lied to you about that?
I know you and I've met your friends, and none of your friends strike me as that lame. And if I found out Emma was going into the voting booth and pulling the lever for Harris, that's the same thing as having an affair. That to me,
oh my God! Let him finish. Jesse.
That violates the sanctity of our marriage.
Yes.
What else is she keeping from me?
Exactly.
What else has she been lying about?
Why would she lie to you? Have you threatened her? Why would she lie to you?
Oh, they want me to tease.
Why would she do that and then vote Harris? Why would she say she was voting Trump and then voting Harris? And I caught her. So and then she said, I lied to you for the last 4 years.
You intimidate
It's over, Emma. That would be D-Day.
And this segment is over. The fastest is up next.
And the fishing.
So, interesting question there by Judge Janine. Why would she have to lie to you? What, do you make her afraid? I only bring that up because Jesse Waters may want to break out the old switchblade to deflate his wife's tires again. Not sure if that was the method he used the first time, but
yeah, you want to vote for Harris? How are you going to get to the polling place?
Exactly. Whoa. I mean, I'm assuming they have multiple cars. He's definitely a millionaire.
I don't know. Crowder didn't.
It's so Good point. Good point. A reminder that Jesse Waters, as he talks about the sanctity of marriage, did leave his first wife for his 25-year-old now wife, Emma, and part of his courtship of her was deflating her tires in the parking lot at Fox News, where they both worked together, so that she would be forced to use him for a ride home.
How can I distress this person into giving me a chance?
And I think that's part of what colors Janine's commentary there. And she's as right-wing and vile as it gets, but there's a certain energy you get when you work with some people as a woman that she may have picked up on. And I will repeat that tire story every single time Jesse Waters opens his goddamn mouth to talk about women, because that's the kind of guy that he is. And if you're a woman watching this show, you know that energy. You've felt that before. And he's the guy who's saying that it would be like an affair if she voted for Harris. Well, it sounds like he's a little worried. And not to psychoanalyze this guy too much, because he doesn't have that much going on in between the years. But I know that his mom is a Democrat, and he likes to make this into a whole bit. But it sounds like he has a lot of women in his life that are telling him, yeah, this isn't these aren't great politics. And he still persists in this manner. Yeah, I think this may be a real dynamic. I think there may actually be this shy vote for Harris from women that pollsters are underestimating a little bit. And we will see. We will see. But the fact that they're even concerned about it at all, and that it tracks with the suburban numbers that we're seeing, and it just tracks with like the fundamentals of the race, which include anger about the overturning of an individual right for half the population by this president. And it's exacerbated by the fact that his entire strategy hasn't adjusted itself to appeal to moderates at all, because the Nazis are running this thing right now. There's no attempt, like back in 2016, again, I repeat the story all the time. My first event that I went to in this industry was a Trump event where Bernie had just dropped out, and Trump was talking about how we have to go against the elites, how there's so much corruption, how Hillary embodies corruption. I'm going to give you all health care. I'm going to end these foreign wars. Unlike the warmonger Hillary Clinton, there were things that made him a much more formidable candidate in this regard. And he tried to win over those voters that were skeptical of her for a variety of reasons. Now it's just like, how can we be as racist and misogynistic as possible? And based on this freak out, I'm not sure it's working out too well for them. All right, folks, quick word from our sponsors here. Nutrafol, one of our favorites. A lot of men think hair thinning is based on genetics alone and do not realize that there's a lot more to it. Nutrafol targets 6 root causes: hormones, stress, lifestyle, metabolism, nutrition, and aging, all of which can trigger hair thinning and activate genetic predisposition. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements are physician-formulated using 100% drug-free ingredients. Their patented technology provides consistent, reliable results. Men also reported no compromise in sexual performance. While many supplements rely solely on ingredient studies, Nutrafol clinically tests final formulations to ensure their efficacy. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvements in their hair after 6 months of taking Nutrafol men's hair growth supplement. With a Nutrafol subscription, building a hair growth routine is simple. Purchase online, no prescription required. Automated deliveries and free shipping keep you on track. Plus, you can save up to 20%, and you'll have access to a free naturopathic doctor consultation, and Headspace membership is included. Take the first step towards achieving your hair growth goals. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code TMR. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. That's Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, promo code TMR. That's Nutrafol, promo code TMR. And lastly, our friends over at Sunset Lake Seder have a sale that ends at the end of the day today, October 31st, Halloween, Eastern Time. 50% off the Goodnight Gummies. 50% off if you use coupon code GOODNIGHT at checkout. I use those Seder gummies basically every night. Their sale ends at the end of the day today, Thursday, October 31st. The sleeper gummies, or the Goodnight Gummies, sorry, are similar to the sleep gummies. This is where I got confused. Apologies. 50% off the Goodnight Gummies if you use coupon code GOODNIGHT at checkout. They're similar to sleep gummies, but they contain a small amount of THC instead of melatonin. So you get a little bit more kick. Take 1 to 2 gummies before bed for the best results. They're vegan, they're gluten-free, they're lab-tested for quality and dosing accuracy. This is their new gummy. It is the Goodnight Gummies. I need to try this now because, like, I nightly. I want to incorporate this into my routine so I can go on and off Goodnight Gummies and the ones with melatonin, so I don't get too used to it. They're great for folks who want to wake up feeling refreshed and rested without using melatonin. Just take one of these Goodnight Gummies an hour before bed and let the full spectrum Seder and Seder work their magic. Right now, you can get a jar of the Goodnight Gummies for 50% off. Just use code GOODNIGHT at checkout. Don't suffer another night of bad sleep. Visit sunsetlakeseder.com and use code GOODNIGHT at checkout. This sale ends October 31st at midnight. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we will be joined by Aaron Kleinman. We are back, and we are joined once again by friend of the show, Aaron Kleinman, Director of Research at the States Project. Aaron, thanks so much for coming and zooming on over to join us here on the Majority Report. For those in the podcast audience, Aaron is decked out in a costume. You want to explain that to folks?
Oh, my son's favorite movie is Cars, so I decided to come as Lightning McQueen. And really, I just wanted to thank all my sponsors, Rusty's, Colgate-Palmolive, Good Guys at Nabisco, and of course, Winston cigarettes. Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
Wow. So you're really committed to the bit here. I haven't seen Cars, as I am a 30-year-old childless cat lady, but with minus the cat's part. But is your son the other car?
He actually, our family went as characters inspired by his tastes. And so he's Paw Patrol, but he wanted Dad to be Lightning.
Okay, all right.
Well, so sort of like a broader universe coming together.
Yeah. Hey, it's a fun holiday for a 5-year-old. We just want to have a good time here. But
agreed.
Let me tell you about
friend.
this election. It's tighter than turn 3 at Darlington. All right.
Okay. But it's not though, Aaron. This is where I'm getting annoyed and like I'm waiting for and I don't know. I can't predict the future, right? And I don't want to jinx anything. But at the risk of boring the entire audience with my theories about polling methodology in this cycle, right? Gallup this morning had Democratic leaning and Democratic voter enthusiasm at its highest since Obama 2008. Women are leading men in early voting in swing states by 10 points. Harris and Walz both have higher favorability than both Trump and J.D. Vance. But I keep hearing from the media that this is the closest race in the history of the country. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, all right. So I will say 2 of those 3 things are important. Early voting, folks, I know it's very tempting to look at early voting numbers. If we went off early voting, Clinton was going to win Florida in 2016 and North Carolina, and we would call election night by 8 p.m. All right. In early voting, we know what the numerator is. We don't know what the denominator is. I've really just, you could also just, slice open a goat and read the entrails. That does you about as much good as early voting. But I think your other 2 points are very well taken. And that, historically, favorability and GDP performance correlates pretty strongly with how the ticket does. And if you look at that right now, it would point to Harris winning about 52% of the 2-party vote. So that would be a good showing. And so, but at the same time, I think that, one thing that may have crept in a little bit 2016, 2020 was a bit of complacency. And so, polls are a tool. They're not oracles. They're not foolproof, but they're a tool. And we have one tool showing us that this thing's really close. We got to treat it like it's really close. We got to run through. We got to keep revving up through that checkered flag there, folks. I don't care if you're in the red. You only got one more lap. Don't worry about the pit. Just
step on it.
Speed on through. That's right. You had time for a pit stop back in September.
Okay, so Nate Silver, I'm just moving past it. Nate Silver's starting to endorse this theory that some of these pollsters are hurting, meaning they're basically taking into account the other pollsters and their results and making it so there's very little variance right now. They're all saying pretty much the same thing with the exception of some of the pollsters we know are still doing actual polling like Gallup, Ipsos, New York Times, Siena, etc. I mean, I guess from somebody that covers these elections like this, what do you make of the fact that there's so little variance? And is like now Nate Silver is CYAing, right? Like, because he previously had been dismissive of this kind of thing. But I do think it'll be interesting to see if there's a reckoning coming in this regard.
Maybe. I mean, I don't think pollsters are sitting there thinking, oh, God, we have a race that's 5 points. We got to make it 1. I think there are methodological decisions being made, things like anchoring polls based on either 2020 vote recall or maybe even party ID that really are kind of leading to uniformity there. And if, hey, if they're all right, then people are going to defend it. If there's a miss, then it's going to be something that people revisit. But like I said, the polls are the polls. They're a tool, and if you base everything off that tool, things are really, really close. But you know what? Like, again, as we've seen, the past 2 presidential elections, it came down to a football stadium full of people, or maybe even a NASCAR Super Raceway full of people across 3 different states. There's certainly reason to believe that could happen again. But if you want to get even smaller, I mean, you want to talk about state legislatures, for example.
I would love to. This is why we have the
that comes down to
yes.
That comes down to a demolition derby full of voters, in a single district. That's hands on a hot car,
which is fewer than the other race he was talking about.
I've lost. I follow real sports, so I really don't know what's going on here. I follow sports where people are are using their bodies
You lose
physically.
15 pounds of water weight in a single NASCAR race. Let me tell you.
I mean, I do that in a sauna. You can do that in the sauna. I don't call me going to my gym's steam room a frickin' sport, but we don't need to get into that right now, Aaron. This is not what we're here for. We're here to finish the race for our democracy.
That's right.
Okay, so states. Right. What do we got to watch out for on the state level here?
All right. So you got, let's start home Pocono, Pennsylvania, the Tricky Triangle. And you have a state house there that has 102 Democrats, 101 Republicans. So close as it can be. There are going to be a few key races there where in order for Democrats to preserve their majority, they have to defend seats in some pretty conservative areas. You're going to need to see some incumbents running pretty well ahead of Trump in areas outside Pittsburgh, areas around Johnstown, areas in Northeast Pennsylvania, but you still have a few flippable seats in the Pittsburgh and Philadelphia suburbs. And so kind of as you see that realignment in the state play out, you can see that at the state legislative level. And then similarly in Pennsylvania, a tie in the state Senate is within reach this cycle. You have half the Senate up every 2 years. So, ideally you could flip to a majority in 2026. So there are key seats around Erie and the Pittsburgh suburbs that we would have to flip there as well. But again, Pennsylvania is, maybe the closest state legislature in the country. And so, it's coming down to the wire, but we have some strong incumbents there. And I think one thing that we have really seen in Pennsylvania that being able to get good stories in local press is just so important for these local candidates. A good press strategy and similarly building up kind of media that can report on things at the state level, that can report on what lawmakers are doing is just really critical to success in that state. So we're hoping to see that borne out in Pennsylvania because we put a lot of work into that.
You mentioned Pennsylvania. I'll just interject here because they obviously 2022 they rode this negative partisanship about these extreme Republicans to success. Josh Shapiro got elected. Are you seeing a bit of that broader dynamic in the states that were most targeted by Trump's false claims of election fraud? Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia. These are states I'm watching out for in terms of maybe Democrats, if they do overperform, there can be a conversation about how election denialism has really hurt Republicans in states where the state Republican legislatures were targeted by Trump supporters because they thought that they were in on the fraudulent activity.
And actually, I think Arizona is a good example of that because Arizona, they have the highest proportion of their Republican caucus as election deniers. And again, that's another state where you have a 1-seat majority for Republicans in both chambers. So if you can flip 2 seats, and again, you could flip, there is, a suburban seat around Tucson where, each district there elects 1 senator and 2 House members. The incumbent senator is a QAnon believer, Republican, and the 2, Republican incumbents for that House seat aren't that far behind. And this is an area, again, Tucson suburbs, area that's well-educated type area that's trending left. And so if you look at, I would keep an eye on Legislative District 17 around Tucson to see if they end up paying the price. Because I think people have thought about this similarly in the Phoenix areas, districts 2 and 4, which are kind of North Phoenix, again, like more suburban parts of that city where people voted for John McCain for decades, and they're like, wait a minute. These people this is the one I bargained for. Oh, and by the way, they're promoting a lot of comments and stuff. Like in Arizona, for example, water is a really big deal. You need water to live. Arizona doesn't really have a lot of it, and the right wingers in Arizona love giving it to the government of Saudi Arabia for some reason. So I'm not kidding. You can look that up. So so that's another state where again, I think this kind of election denial kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of kind of right-wing policies that really just don't work for people, even if they are kind of temperamentally conservative. Hopefully, they're kind of waking up to the fact that even if you feel that way, just the right-wing party in the country really doesn't serve you very well.
And in Arizona too, there's abortion on the ballot, which is another part of this election that I think is getting a little lost in translation. Nevada, Arizona, the two big swing states where abortion will be on the ballot. But even in a state like Florida, where I saw Walz and Hillary are down there or going there either today or this week. Yeah. I'm shocked by that. One, they're probably like, where can we stick Hillary that she does the least damage? I wish they considered that with Bill Clinton's comments about Israel-Palestine yesterday. But I mean, we can talk about that separately. But like, do they really think that because of abortion that there's a chance that Senate race is in play in Florida, or are we just like kidding ourselves if we're talking about that?
Yeah, I don't know about Florida. And part of it too is, that cuts both ways, where if you know that the right to choose is protected in your state, suddenly there may be less, motivation for people who are pro-choice but agree with Republicans on other things to vote for Democrats for office. So, it's hard to say which way it'll cut. But, certainly, candidates supporting the right to choose is pretty critical. And, you have that too in Michigan, for example, where we helped flip the state legislature in 2022, and we've been able to pass a whole bunch of laws really protecting the right to choose there. And, we're trying, again, that's another state where you have a 1-seat margin in both chambers, and the Senate isn't up this cycle. So the Senate's protected, but the Michigan State House, everyone's up. And again, it's going to be really close. Trying to make gains in the Detroit suburbs, trying to not lose as much ground, maybe some more blue collar areas, similar kind of stories the rest of the country. And so again, that's another really critical state where hopefully the fact that they have really seen Democrats step up there and protect the right to choose, hopefully that can really buoy candidates there.
You mentioned some of the working class support or maybe some of the concerns in there in Michigan. That there was some polling done that Harris had lost some working class support, union support in Pennsylvania. There was some counter kind of analysis to that to say, okay, well, it's less of that the case in the other two Rust Belt swing states, Michigan and Wisconsin, because the union membership and also working class there are less white than in Pennsylvania. I guess if you could expand on that thought, what are you seeing on that front? And I have concerns about the Democrats bleeding that support and just continuously racking up college-educated, high-propensity voters for the future of the coalition. But that's a broad question. Just curious about.
Yeah, well, I mean. Wisconsin, unfortunately, thanks to Scott Walker, has one of the lowest union populations of any Midwestern state. I think actually, if you look at swing states, Wisconsin may have fewer union households per capita than Nevada, which is not typical. Nevada, right. Obviously, we know that the culinary is really big there, but that's kind of just, it shows kind of how a decade under right-wing rule really has decimated things that really help the working class stand up for itself. But in Wisconsin, they have fair maps for the first time in more than a decade. So we might be able, they have another state senate where only half of it is up every 2 years. But, the state assembly, it's feasible to flip it in one cycle. And state senate maybe setting up for 2026. So maybe if it's possible, if people keep working in Wisconsin, you might be able to repeal right to work. And actually, again, because we have seen that being a member of the union does correlate more with supporting policies that really help the working class. So Wisconsin's another kind of key state where we're looking to try to improve state policy by improving the state legislature.
And I guess we could turn to the South here, right? I mean, North Carolina, big election there, obviously, with Stein versus Robinson. What are you seeing on the North Carolina front? It's less optimistic for Harris than I would have thought. But there's also, I think, real fears from the Republicans that Stein's going to win very handily. And along with that, means potential flips for the state government where the Republicans have a supermajority in North Carolina.
Right. I mean, we're trying, so right now it would be a huge shock if Stein lost. So what that means though is that the right has really poured all its resources into maintaining their legislative supermajority and just trying to undermine him as much as possible with that. And so, but again, we're doing our best to try to make sure that they don't get that supermajority. It's coming down to, there are a bunch of suburban districts in, like in the Raleigh and the Charlotte areas that, are really critical to that. But also there are some like rural Eastern Carolina areas that, are still pretty marginal. And again, hopefully kind of that message about really standing up for working folks really helps out there. But yeah, in terms of, the top of the ticket, that, I think when you look at maps coming in on election night, it's not so much which counties are going blue and red, but it's cutting into it's the margins in the big blue and red counties. So it's like, can you run up those big margins in Mecklenburg County, home to Charlotte, and also a number of those important state legislative races. And in Wake County, same story. But also, can you kind of lower the right-wing margins in the big exurban counties? Like Union County outside Charlotte or Johnston County outside of Raleigh. And, because as, younger families kind of move further out from city cores, they're not thinking about, I go over the county line. I'm going over this county line because I want to live in a red county or a blue county. No, they're just going to the cheapest place closest to work. And so you're seeing right-wing margins in those kind of going down a little bit. And also in Cabarrus County, too, is actually one of the biggest ones. Near the home to Dale, by the way, where that is probably going purple more than any other exurban county, and it also has they were able to gerrymander the state house, but there is still a winnable state house seat there. That'll be really critical. So it's not so much which counties are going blue and red in North Carolina, but look at the margins relative to 2020 to see how it's going that night. And also on election night, North Carolina, they've had some changes in state law that may muck things up a little bit, but it should be pretty quick to report. And so North Carolina, I remember in 2022 seeing that we won a rural House seat there. I'm like, it's not going to be a blowout. North Carolina was what showed that to me. So on election night, look at North Carolina, keep an eye on that, see what's going on there. And of course, make sure that we're breaking the supermajority there, because it's great to have Josh Stein as governor, but if his vetoes can get overridden, there's only so much he can do.
So what are those bellwethers in North Carolina to watch out for? Can you say it again? I'm actually writing this down.
All right. So again, it's not necessarily like the bellwether in the state was New Hanover County. Biden carried it, but he still lost the state because Trump was able to run up big margins in exurban counties like Johnston and Cabarrus and Union and Gaston. And Biden wasn't able to get big enough margins out of like Wake and Mecklenburg. And so it's not so much, is this blue, is this red, but is it blue enough? Is it red enough on election night? And that'll be a big thing in North Carolina to look out for.
What are the other kind of battleground, or maybe not battleground state, but races throughout the country where people should be watching out for on the House level? What does this indicate about the rest of the electorate, maybe, but also what are the most important key flips that we should be looking out for on Tuesday night?
Yeah, so in terms of state legislatures outside, like I think I went over all the main kind of majority make or break ones, but Nevada, another swing state where it's going to take a while for us to know because of how that's just how Nevada votes, and it allows people to it's good for voter participation. You just got to wait a little bit. You got to be patient, but you do have a right wing governor there who endorsed Trump, but you also have a chance at winning a supermajority in the state legislature. So it's kind of like a reverse North Carolina where they can pass, he vetoed a law protecting contraception. You can pass a law protecting contraception in Nevada if you win legislative supermajorities there. So keep an eye out for that. Also, if you look at a state like Kansas, for example, you have a Democratic governor, but you also have a right-wing supermajority. So breaking that supermajority is crucial. And, Minnesota, Tim Walz' home state, we're hoping to maintain that state house majority that kind of has catapulted him into the Veep stakes, so to speak. And then similarly in New Hampshire, people don't really think of it as a swing state as much anymore because Harris has tended to have pretty solid leads in polling there for most of the cycle. But we have a chance of breaking right-wing majorities in the Senate, flipping the House, and maybe even winning the governorship, so you could turn what is now barely a right-wing trifecta into a potential Democratic trifecta. So New Hampshire will also be one of those first states to report, so you can take a look there to see how things are going.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you're not as focused on these big blue states like New York State, but I am curious, really lastly here, Aaron, if you're hearing things about voter enthusiasm in the state. We've been concerned about the right-wing shift in the state for quite a while, and I think that is why you can account for Harris's basically tie in polling on the popular vote. Like there's this pipe dream Trump supporters have that he's going to win the popular vote or whatever. I don't think that's necessary. It's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
For the first time with him, really. But that's in large part due to the fact that like these populous states like Florida, but also California and New York, like they may not be able to drive. Both candidates may not be able to drive up the numbers in those states that don't really matter to the Electoral College, but do matter down ballot. What's your sense of that theory?
I'm certainly, and I mean, I would say, particularly at the macro level, it's not just that it could be contributing the New York's kind of rightward shift, because there is one happening. I think in New York, I think there has been, especially kind of the Adams mayoralty has not been a great advertisement for Democrats writ large.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that really impacts. And similarly, I think that there has been a localized shift. And you saw this in 2022 when districts that straddled the New York and Philadelphia media markets, like the Philadelphia media marketplace was like fine. And then the half of the district in the New York media market zoomed to the right. And so, there may be something going on with that. But I think it also contributes to a lot of the discourse around this, because you have a lot of people, in the media on Wall Street who think Trump has this thing in the bag. Well, those people live in New York, and they probably know a lot of people who are flipping from supporting Democrats to supporting Trump, because that's kind of the milieu that they're in. It's almost like a reverse of 2016 when, like, people like me, I was like, oh my God, all these people I knew that voted for Romney are now going to vote for Clinton. Well, yeah, it's because they're people I knew from the University of Virginia.
Right.
Right. That's not indicative of the electorate as a whole. And, it's a lesson that I learned the hard way. And so I don't want to discount anything. I think that I agree with you, Emma, that certain, kind of not the horse race polling, but the peripheral polling in terms of, favorability,
right,
and the fundamentals around kind of, special elections, Washington top two primary, things that normally predict vote share, more bullish for Democrats than polling would have you believe. But, it could be that part of this narrative around, the inevitability of Trump comes from that. But we have 5 days to figure that out.
We do. 5 long days. Aaron Kleinman, you can check out the States Project. What are you guys working on? How can people support?
So, all right. So, folks, this is literally the last day that we're running GiveSmart. So, like, after tonight, we're shutting it off because we just can't guarantee you that your money will get there in time if you donate too late. So please, statesproject.org, donate to GiveSmart. Those are the 8 state legislative candidates across the country who could use your donations the most right now. If you want to make a donation before the election, do it there. Do it today, please. I'm not going to text you, but we use Oath as our donation platform, so it doesn't give out your phone number and your email to everyone. So you won't get annoying texts. I get them too. I don't like them. I don't want you to get them. So that's why we use Oath. So please check it out. That is, if you're freaking out about the election, you want to do something, that is something you can do.
Amazing. All right. Well, thanks, Aaron. And we will put
Thank
a
you,
link to
Emma.
all of that in the description wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much.
All right, folks. Have a good one.
All
Remember,
right. Drive off into the sunset.
foot on the gas through that checkered flag, everyone.
Later, Aaron. All right. Quick break. And when we come back, we'll be joined by Representative Ruwa Romman. We are back, and we are joined now by Representative Ruwa Romman, Georgia State Representative, the first Palestinian ever elected in Georgia and the first Muslim woman elected to the Georgia State House. Her piece in Rolling Stone is entitled, "The DNC Tried to Silence Her. Here's Her Plan After Voting for Harris." Representative Romman, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess let's go back to the DNC and talk a little bit about that experience. We played the remarks, your full speech that you gave outside of the DNC hall in Chicago on our program because you were unable to articulate yourself at the convention. Uncommitted had put you forward as a name, even though you are voting for Kamala Harris and were going to endorse her in your speech at the DNC. If you could just explain how all of that happened and what your feelings were after that.
Yeah, so, as I've told people a lot now, I was not even supposed to be at the DNC. I didn't have credentials. I was there for a very different panel. But Uncommitted had been in negotiations with the DNC for 2 months at that point, trying to figure out, specifically their biggest ask was a policy commitment to stopping weapons shipments, because at this point we were breaking our own laws to continue shipping these weapons that were killing innocent Palestinians. And they had submitted, from my understanding, multiple names at that point. And this was the Hail Mary, right? They were talking about, I think it was me, Dr. Haj Hassan, Representative Abdel Nasser, who is a Palestinian in Illinois. But the idea was, look, we've sent all of these names. We're just asking for a few minutes on the stage as a sort of symbolic gesture. We understand there's a lot of work left to do on policy, but we wanted to show our base, for lack of a better word, that, hey, there's a place for us here in this party. And to be clear, the part that's most surprising to me is that when you go back and you watch speeches from the DNC, the largest applause lines were about Gaza. Anywhere you looked, not just during Uncommitted's panel on Monday, but anywhere you looked, people were wearing ceasefire shirts, pins, kufiyas, Palestinian flags. The base had clearly shifted on this. This would have been a very easy win. And, even at the time and even now, I'm still very confused and still don't have an answer as to why they refused to have any Palestinian, because it's not about me, right? I was the public Hail Mary. My speech got leaked, so I think people were able to visualize what that could look like. But the reality was, and I kind of, my expectations of the DNC are really low.
Right.
The first primary I got involved in was like 2016, so I've learned to not have expectations from the DNC. I knew either we got somebody on that stage or we exposed systemic racism, and I'm really sad to say that concern about that racism, particularly against Palestinians, might have been well-founded.
Absolutely. I mean, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim racism in this country is bipartisan, and that doesn't make, I think, either of us. I'm a registered Democrat. I will be voting for Harris. You also are a Democratic representative who will be voting for Harris. That doesn't make me feel good about the party that I think is the better one to support, definitely better than Republicans, that's for sure. But it shows how long of a way we have to go. Did they give you any explanation? I mean, what was their understanding that this was a fear of AIPAC, or was it just what you say, like, we don't want a Palestinian on our stage for the racist reasons that we all understand?
if I knew exactly why that happened the way that it did, I think this conversation would be very different. But we weren't even given the dignity of an explanation, and that has been the most infuriating part about all of this. Because you and I could sit here and come up with 1,000 reasons why they could have said yes, but I think that is why I very purposely use the term systemic racism, because clearly there was some sort of decision-making mechanism that landed on no, in spite of where the base is, in spite of organizations and unions calling for either me specific, and members of Congress, by the way, calling for either me specifically or just any Palestinian speaker on that stage. And I want to be clear, it really was not about me. It was about any Palestinian donor, family member, non-political person. I don't even think it mattered. And to be honest with you, part of the reason I ended up joining the sit-in that Wednesday night, it wasn't even because people were saying, oh, the sit-in started after the family of the Israeli hostage was on stage. What they don't understand is that we got the no right after that family got on stage. Like they literally, I was with Abbas when he got the phone call, and I heard the phone call. And I just remember thinking like, my God, they really missed out on an opportunity. And so the sit-in kind of started because I think understandably, a lot of folks with uncommitted were just very, very upset because they had done things, quote unquote, right within the system. They pulled every lever, pushed every button the way they were supposed to. But I remember going to just make sure everybody was okay. And on the screens outside the convention center, you saw Jeff Duncan, who was lieutenant governor for Georgia and oversaw the passing of the heartbeat bill that has now made abortion illegal in Georgia. I saw him on that stage. And that was the moment I sat down and joined the sit-in, because I was thinking, oh my God, they have room for a swing state Republican, but not an elected Palestinian who's a Democrat from that same swing state. And so when we talk about sort of like the systemic racism of it all, it's the lack of explanation. It's the fact that anybody could veto something like this. It's the fact, and I want to be clear, it wasn't just me, right? At that point, we'd found out the Tennessee 3 were bumped. I believe there was a trans elected member that was supposed to be speaking. There was a clear sort of shift at that point that to me was like, no, I am putting my foot down and I'm anchoring our party in a place where we want it to go rather than being pulled into this direction that doesn't represent us.
Have you been facing threats or just racism or harassment because of the fact that you chose to be so visible, even and especially because you're in Georgia and the state's on moving in a more progressive direction, but there's still some retrograde elements.
Totally. I think it's really easy to focus on the negatives, but it's hard for me to focus on the negative because for every like 20 messages we got, maybe one of them was negative or awful or terrible or whatever the case may be. And that, frankly, to me is surprising because I worked for CARE Georgia when Trump was in office, where we were targeted by like armed militia and stuff. So my threshold is very different than most people's, but the reality is that it has been overwhelmingly positive. And that's what I mean when I say the base has shifted on this. No matter how much there are people trying to put this genie back in the bottle, it's not going to work. It's, if anything else, it's actually exposed how entrenched all of this is and kind of made people even more committed to changing it moving forward.
Absolutely. And I guess that's a great way for us to transition to what the plan is, as you write in your article, after voting for Kamala Harris. You know, this is not representative of the uncommitted movement. That's a separate, you're not a part of that because you're obviously committed to voting for her. But it is just a perspective that I think is fascinating to highlight. So how did you come to that decision? Have you spoken to other folks who are of Palestinian descent, who are grappling with it as well? And what's your message that you'd like to get out there for people?
Yeah. So first and foremost, and I think y'all had actually talked a little bit about some of this, was that my biggest concern right now is turnout. I'm really worried about my community not voting, because what people don't understand is that Trump wins when he surgically targets members of our coalition to convince them not necessarily to vote for him, but just not to vote for us. That is how they win. And I have yet to have a conversation with a single Palestinian or Muslim person that doesn't feel conflicted about their vote, even if they ultimately decide to vote for her. This has been literally a daily conversation in every WhatsApp group I'm in every Signal chat I'm in, literally everywhere I look. Anyone who cares in any way, not just about Palestine, but just progressive values in general, has really struggled this election cycle, which is why I'm so concerned. And there's a few things that I think have helped. First and foremost, I've tried to explain to people that election cycles do not care about our timeline on work, right? They come up and they go. They come up and they go. The work continues outside of that. And I view voting not as the end of the conversation, but as the beginning of the conversation. But as a part of that, I actually have been helping out with the Swap Your Vote initiative because I do believe in people being able to sort of, within the limitations of our electoral system, express their protest and their vote, and also help increase turnout for down ballot races, particularly in safe blue states, where you have like propositions in California about to fail because not enough people are voting for them. And so, so I've been doing a lot of that kind of like, hey, let me show you ways to strategically, whether it's building a third party protest vote, whatever, there are ways to do that, particularly if you're in a swing state, like with Swap Your Vote, and still be able to have a protest vote. The other piece of it is talking about things that are going to be happening after the election. So Bernie Sanders has a joint resolution to stop more weapons shipments to Israel. And what I've asked people is literally this week and next week, call your senators and then call your House representatives to tell them to get the senators to support this joint resolution. And also call your state reps and your state senators, asking them to ask the senators on your behalf to support this resolution. So this work does not stop. These bills are not stopping. And for me personally, the thing that I'm most focused on is how do we merge these incredible protests that we have seen in the streets and these movements that we have seen in the streets and all of those people, and like be able to hone, because that is real power. But it has been, and I hate to say this, but it's actually easy for some of these members of Congress that are not sympathetic and even other elected officials up and down the ballot to ignore, because it's like they're almost in a weird way insulated from it. And how do you uninsulate them? You literally show up with your like one pager and your packets and you're like, I'm a constituent and I'm sitting down with you. And I was right outside with 100,000 people who also agree with me. And I'm telling you, these are the policies I want you to do. And it doesn't have to be adversarial. It doesn't have to be like, you know, fighting. I have been really surprised at how many of my colleagues have changed their minds just after a conversation. And I think we have a serious opportunity here to expand that coalition, whether it's in Congress, state legislators, state reps, city, you name it. I think it's time for us to figure out how do we take everybody in the streets and teach them how to talk to their members of Congress as their constituents and build out a very, very serious block, not just voting, which is really important, particularly for primaries in the future, but also to apply pressure in these halls that tend to not have us in them.
Right. And you mentioned Bernie Sanders there. Bernie doesn't even say the word genocide, right? And that's what it's both a bubble, I think, that you're talking about, but it's also a permission structure about what's acceptable and what isn't. And that's a big thing that I think we need to break through with this conversation. If you could just speak to that as a state representative, as someone in government, how insulated sometimes you feel or you can observe your colleagues are from these realities, even when you say at the DNC, it's clear the base has shifted. They support an arms embargo or at least restricting weapons to Israel. They want to shift in policy. That slow lack of, recognition by our elected officials. Like, what's your experience with that?
Totally. So the way I explain it to people is that when it comes to international affairs in particular, unlike healthcare, the majority of these elected officials don't have experience with it. That's just the reality situation. So what they do is they rely on the briefings that they get, on lobbyists that come to them, on those who are already in some way, shape, or form already plugged in. Those are the people they're only listening to. And I'm not even joking when I tell you that I have facilitated conversations between Palestinian families and members of Congress where the Palestinian family whose family's in Gaza is able to tell them, like, my family is sheltering in a church and it was bombed. And obviously there's no way for us to fully know this, but I'm willing to bet anything I have that contradicted intelligence reports they were getting, because those intelligence reports rely on Israeli sources. We now, thanks to ProPublica and others, are telling us that many of our elected officials are relying on Israeli resources and nothing else, which is giving them this sort of very one-sided, skewed perspective that's telling them, oh, you know, the public doesn't know any better. We've got these sort of intel that only people with a clearance can see. And it already takes away a massive segment of the population out of the conversation. But when you sit with them and you say, I've got family in Gaza, or I know someone who has family in Gaza, or now Lebanon and Syria, and they can tell you to your face, this was my family's house. This was the second oldest church in the world. Why are we bombing it? And like, it's hard to turn around and look at somebody and go, but Hamas is using you as a human shield, which in and of itself is racist, right? It is absolutely insanely racist to justify taking down an entire apartment building full of hundreds of people because of a potential, by the way. There has been no confirmation of any of this.
And
that
Mossad's headquarters are in the middle of Israel. I mean, like that is military installations being near or embedded in civilian infrastructure is not a justification.
Yeah.
But you know this,
it's
of
never
course.
been. But it has. But here, and I know. Listen, the urgency of ending the genocide has not changed. I want to be very, very clear. That is an urgent thing that needs to end. The reality, though, is that people are people, even elected officials. And before I can even get them to support the policies I want them to support, I have to give them the information that they need that they are currently not getting. And the only way to do that is to amplify the voices of Palestinians that I know, Lebanese people that I know, Syrian people that I know who have family impacted, who have had to evacuate, whatever the case may be, because they have no way to personally interact with this, right? Unlike healthcare, unlike the economy, unlike whatever, they don't have personal ties to this. So there's no way for them to go into a briefing room in a secure whatever facility and be able to say, well, my family said this is not true. That unless you're Rashida, like that rarely ever happens in these spaces. And it's up to us to break those bubbles, because to me, I genuinely think that is the surest way to ending this genocide.
And in terms of the potential to push the administration, I don't want to be Pollyannish about it, but I do want your honest view. Is there, my assessment has been from the get-go that Biden is not uniquely racist, but for a Democrat, very ideologically Zionist. Harris is more, in my view, still a Zionist, but still a standard Democrat. And that shift, as well as you say, the electorate shifting, presents an opportunity, even if things feel extremely bleak right now. Is that also your view of the situation?
100%. I found President Biden, based on the experiences of those that have met with him, he clearly has an empathy gap on this. And it kills me because a lot of people, including myself, supported him because post-COVID, we needed somebody to help us through the grief. We needed somebody who could be that empathetic voice. But it is clear to me that he does not view Palestinians as people. I don't know how else to describe it. We had doctors who met with him and would try to show him photos, and he would say things like, oh, I've seen all the photos. And they're like, there's no way you could have seen this. I literally took this picture. I'm trying to show you something. Like, he was so incredibly dismissive. He questioned the death toll, even as I was fielding phone calls from desperate people saying, like, I've lost 10 family members, 100 family members. I mean, it was the most beyond infuriating. But the thing is, I think he's uniquely bad on this, which is terrible. I just think it's just having the worst person possible for this moment. And the people he surrounds himself with are uniquely bad on this. We know that there are certain decision-making processes that happen when it comes to the White House. And on this issue, he surrounded himself by the same incredibly hardcore pro-Israel people that are refusing to even consider that Israel might be doing something bad. And we have given them so much cover on the international stage, on the domestic stage. I just don't see how this continues under a presidency that isn't his and under a presidency that isn't Trump's. Because let's not forget that on the Trump side, he's got folks giving him $100 million because they want to annex the West Bank. And they want to be able to like try to imagine Lindsey Graham as Secretary of State or like Ted Cruz as Secretary of State. And that just terrifies me. And as much as he's been giving a lot of lip service, and again, this is the Democrats' fault. Like, we should have never left the lane open for these people to have any meetings with Arab and Muslim leaders and constituents. But the reality is that no matter, if you notice, he never uses the word Palestinian in anything that he says. He still thinks it's
except as a slur to say Chuck Schumer, as a Palestinian. Yeah.
And so, I that's why I say that I think the work continues November 6th. Like, for me, it's just a matter of keeping the terrible forces not getting worse. And in the meantime, relying on our unions who have already called for an arms embargo, relying on progressive organizations that have called for an arms embargo, bringing this multi-faith, multiracial coalition to talk about, push for ending the genocide and applying that pressure. Because again, voting is the beginning of a conversation. And two, we need this coalition because we don't know what economic policies are going to look like. We don't know if there's going to be any backsliding because we didn't have your typical year-long election cycle to vet a candidate. And so we have to be ready during the transition period to pick better staff members, to have better policy, to be submitting those memos, to be talking about these issues and keep them front of center. I actually think November 6th should be a renewal of our efforts, not an ending of our efforts.
Absolutely. Representative Ruwa Romman, thank you so much for your time today and for all of your efforts. We will put a link to your piece in the description down below. But how can people help? Some of, you mentioned some of like the vote swap thing that you're doing, et cetera, if you don't mind plugging that one more time.
So I've got like 3 things for y'all. First and foremost, if you're in a swing state and you are still struggling and want to protest vote as well, my recommendation is swap your vote. So go to swapyourvote.org. You can fill out a form. Second thing is make sure that you're contacting your senators by phone and email to ask them to support Bernie Sanders' joint resolution. And the third piece is honestly just be ready to get to work come November 6th and apply that pressure. For example, Chuck Schumer is now saying he's thinking about introducing the bill that would criminalize criticism of the state of Israel based on a definition related to anti-Semitism, which is really concerning. Yeah. So the work isn't stopping. Like, just be ready. Obviously, take a little bit of a break because I know we all need it, but just be ready and get ready to keep pushing.
Thanks so much, Representative Ruwa Romman. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program and head into what we call the fun half, where the number is 646-257-3920. We'll be taking your calls and reading your IMs. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, I just want to reflect. I like that answer she gave about, the types of threats that she's received, because I think some certain politicians, and I've heard this about Ilhan too, like the type of threats and things like, and you want to have a, say, close relationship with an FBI office near because of the type of menacing things that you get. But what I respect about Ruwa is that answer of saying, like, look, it's part of the territory, which is just an incredible amount of bravery to me, because I know people who have staffed up congressional offices, and it is scary out there in some of these places, especially in the state, at the state level. And yeah.
I mean, and you put yourself on the line for extreme smears as well, like Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, for example, are great. Yeah. It's a tragedy that frickin' AIPAC has gotten rid of 2 of our best voices in Congress, and we still haven't even, I think, sat with that.
It's an assault on our democracy that, is...
From a foreign power.
The work's going to have to go on,
Although it's not, the point is it's not a foreign power.
Our colonial outpost.
It's basically our colony, yes, yeah.
But we had a good show this week. We had 2... translators of the recent Marx Capital Volume 1 on. David Griscom talked to them about why they translated again, and is it some sort of secret social democratic revision of Marx that they unsurprisingly argue it's not, and I kind of buy it. Also, Austin Allman from Nebraska went around Nebraska talking to people and see if Dan Osborne can win that race. So check that out, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
And on ESPN, Bradley and I will be giving our picks against the spread. We'll also say RIP to the Yankees. Congrats to Dodgers fans on their gentleman's sweep of the World Series, youtube.com/ESPN show. And we do have Brandon Sutton. There he is. 1 second. No Binder as of right now. He has some Halloween festivities he may be a little bit busy with. Happy Halloween. There he is, Brandon.
Hey.
Where are you calling from? Where are you calling from?
You had a magician sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my Halloween. Some people like to dress up for Halloween. I like to dress up my room. It's this new thing.
Oh yeah.
No.
It's like what we do in the shadows, and
right.
Exactly.
You look backstage.
I like it's like a nice fabric. It's a nice satiny fabric.
I like it a lot. What's happening on the discourse?
Yes. So actually, you know what? I've been streaming a lot recently, and by a lot, I mean multiple times a week. And so a lot of the discourse for the past week has been done through live streams, which I think people have been really enjoying. They've been watching dozens even. And the discourse has recently got into affiliate status on Twitch. I don't know exactly what that means.
Wow.
Yeah, I like to look at it like, you know how when Bulbasaur turns into Venusaur, that's what it is to me. So
a Pokemon evolution, yeah.
You can get in on the ground floor of becoming a subscriber, or I don't know what they're called on a Twitchy. You can become a Twitchy of the discourse on Twitch. I might also be restreaming it to YouTube live. Kind of some people prefer watching on YouTube, but we will see about that. So You can go on the Patreon and catch the previous live streams. You can go on the Twitch and catch the previous Twitch streams. Well, I guess it's the same thing. And then next week, we will be doing some live streams on the day of and the day after the election. So that Tuesday morning, I won't be encroaching on your live show, but that Tuesday morning and then the next day in the aftermath.
Oh, God.
So
if we even know the results by that point.
I mean, I think there's no way it's over that week. I think, generally speaking, they're going to be extending. This is going to be the longest election you've ever experienced in your entire life. But yeah, I'll be experiencing that live with you. So you can follow me on Twitter at PrettyBadLefty. You can follow the discourse at patreon.com/expandthediscourse. You can follow us on Twitch, where at twitch.com/the discourse, but the E in the is a 3 because I'm an elite hacksaw. So yeah, I'm all over the place. So good stuff.
All right. Check that out, folks. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait. Look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset?
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and...
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi. I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
I had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job.
Tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. Willy Wonka tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. What's that offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
Real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
That offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's
poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, buddy.
Tour, sushi, and